Welcome to the Sweep Baseball Podcast, where we talk all the happenings from the past week of college baseball. Really was a hectic one, I'd say. Most of the teams seemed to struggle, but you know that means a lot of the underdogs did well and really shook up the rankings pretty significantly. We'll start off with the top of the top. Texas staying at number one. Just another week, another close series, but ending out sweeping A&M at home. Just consistently, it seems like teams cannot figure out how to win in Austin. Just super impressive stuff. Texas just has the winning mentality and knows how to win tight games or blow out teams. It doesn't seem to matter, but yeah, Texas just continues to win no matter what.
Yeah, and it's really impressive that they continue to do that, even dealing with some significant injuries. But yeah, just continue to do it. And yeah, up to this point, all these big series they've had have been at home. But this upcoming week, big weekend against Arkansas, who is struggling, but it'll be interesting to see if they can put together those same performances on the road there at Arkansas.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get into that later when looking at upcoming series, but that's definitely one of the headliners there. It's really impressive, especially with Texas' first year in the SEC. They have a chance to break the record for the best record in conference ever. So that's super just insane for a squad that hasn't been put through the ringer like this before, and to be able to do it with, like you said, the injuries that they've gone through, some super important players, starting pitchers, really important infielders, just a lot of stuff going on there, and to be able to consistently just win and sweep series from that angle is just consistently very impressive. But from there, it was a mess to say the least, to figure out the next few teams, especially the top 10, where teams would fall. A lot of them losing their series. A lot of teams going 2-2 with maybe a series win or a series lost with some midweeks as well. But yeah, we just decided to move North Carolina up. They've been pretty consistent recently, at least. They had their struggles earlier in the season, but now sitting at number two for us because they did win their weekend series at Pitt, even though it's not the toughest competition, but other teams struggled against maybe relative, at least, you know, not ranked teams in that sense, but North Carolina just taking advantage of the opportunity there and winning a series at Pitt, which is enough for them to jump up a few spots to that number two right now.
Yeah, five of the top seven teams lost their weekend series. The two that didn't, Texas, North Carolina, are top two now. And it feels like after Texas, it's just a jumbled mess for maybe the next 15 spots or so. It's really hard to differentiate between these teams at this point. It felt like there might have been like a group behind Texas that had kind of separated themselves in the top 10 there. But pretty much all those teams lost this last week, and it feels like everybody's grouped together now, which makes things really interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how these last couple weeks finish up, how the conference tourneys go, and how the seeding winds up, because it feels like there's so many teams in contention for a hosting spot right now. And the rankings and RPI don't always reflect each other either. So it's going to be a really interesting home stretch.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many moving pieces the past few weeks. It did seem like, a few weeks ago there was that like maybe top 8 where they had kind of separated themselves in the past few weeks. Some of those top SEC schools especially have been losing pretty consistently. We're looking at the Arkansas, the Tennessees, who we now drop down to 11 and 12. Those teams look like some of the best in the country, but have hit a little bit of a bump here, and the teams taking advantage. LSU just had their series win versus Tennessee. Really could have gone either way. That Friday game probably should have been Tennessee's game to win, and they choked it pretty much. But that doesn't get shown anywhere. But if you really dig into things, and that doesn't matter for RPI and eventually for the rankings, people forget about the exact moments in a game and just look at the overall record and what happened in the series. So yeah, you got to give it to LSU. They took advantage of the situation and winning that series when they probably shouldn't have, but they take it and they move up a few spots because of that. And Tennessee drops all the way down to 12, which is I don't think they are the 12th best team in the country. I think they're definitely a top 8 at least, maybe even higher than that. Similarly with Arkansas, but just have gone through a pretty rough spell. I mean, the SEC is always going to be a ringer, but I think they will turn it around. Just is a matter of when and if that will happen, but I really think that will be the case.
Yeah, it's interesting to see those struggles. Some people had them pinned as the most overrated team coming into this season. Won't say who, but it's looking like that individual or those people may have, had some accuracy behind those thoughts. We'll see how things go, but they are obviously a very good team, and I'm sure they'll be able to pull things together these last couple of weeks. But certainly sliding right now. And like you mentioned, LSU, one of the big beneficiaries of all those teams losing. Another beneficiary, West Virginia, jumping all the way up to 6. That's a team that has just been consistently climbing this entire year. Took a long time for them to get into the rankings because they just didn't play anybody and still don't have any super impressive series wins, but just continue to win games. Only have 5 losses right now. Only other team at that mark is Texas. So up there with some good competition, and this past weekend allowed them to jump up, almost breaking into the top 5 now, sitting there at 6.
Yeah, definitely the strength of their opponents between Texas and West Virginia might vary a little bit. The Q1 record for Texas is just ridiculous. West Virginia doesn't necessarily have the exact same resume to compete with that, but yeah, they just keep winning, and because teams around them are losing, they are taking advantage of that. And yeah, now it's 6 with only 5 losses. There's a reason for that, but maybe not necessarily a top 10 team, but they are in hosting contention, and they probably should. If the season ended at this point, they definitely should be a host. But I'm also looking at teams like UC Irvine, super impressive week, taking advantage of what may be their toughest week of the season. They faced UCLA in the midweek and then went to Cal Poly and swept that series. So they're really just taking advantage of all the opportunities in front of them and now put in a spot to really solidify their hosting position. They have a pretty rough stretch ahead of them with teams that have just absolutely abysmal RPIs. But if they can take advantage, hopefully win all those games, they should be in a spot to host and maybe be even a top 8 seed there.
Yeah, it's certainly a situation where you really just have to take control of what you can and win those games. If you drop a game there, it's going to be tough on the RPI, but you know, if they do control their own destiny there, and if they're able to win all those games, certainly expect them to be hosting. We kind of have a jumble of those West Coast schools at the back end of the top 10 there, and just outside of it too, with UCLA and Arizona close by as well. But Oregon jumping up into the top 10 after sweeping Oregon State. And then Oregon State drops back from 3-9 after getting swept by Oregon. So a big in-state rivalry there. Oregon on the right side of things this time, and yeah, it's kind of hard to differentiate between all those West Coast schools right now, as you see with a lot of them in that 8 to 15 range.
Yeah, for sure. And we did say with that Oregon State series that it should be a lot of high scoring games. Of course, that didn't happen. There was only one, and it wasn't necessarily high scoring on both ends. Just Oregon completely dominated that game, but the other two on the weekend were pitching duels. As expected, we said that because we think it's going to be high scoring games, they're going to end up being pretty low scoring, and of course that's essentially what happened throughout the weekend. But yeah, two really close games that maybe could have gone either way. Oregon coming out on the positive side on both of those with some good bullpen performances, which was really the struggle for the past few weeks at least. So we'll see if that's turning around. If it is, then this Oregon team could be pretty strong down the stretch. But another team to mention that is rising pretty quickly is NC State, preseason top 25 team. Had their struggles earlier in the season, dropped out pretty quickly. But now with the sweep versus what was number 2 Clemson, we had Clemson only dropping back one spot with just how things shaken out, and that being their first series loss of the year. And also Clemson getting a midweek win versus Georgia, which definitely helped their position there. But NC State jumping up 6 spots from 23 to 17 now, and could rise a lot faster if they continue to show what they've been showing the past few weeks. They've been maybe forcing their way into the conversation of being a host if they can continue to round out the season like they have been.
Yeah, extremely hot right now. In the month of April, only have 3 total losses, so winning a lot of games right now, and yeah, just hot down the stretch. And that series sweep over Clemson was huge. Like we mentioned, Clemson had not dropped a series up until this point, and so being able to sweep that team, that really spoke highly of NC State's form right now.
Yeah, for sure. It does seem like Clemson was kind of riding the same form as Texas, where they just figured out ways to win. And I feel like finally bites you in the back. Eventually, you get one of those terrible series. Texas has yet to have those. People are kind of predicting that this could be the week, since this is their toughest road test of the year at Arkansas. We'll see if that's the case, but it feels like when you have so many close games that you come out on top of, eventually there's going to be that just like rough week where things just don't go your way. There's, innings get extended with error, something like that, and games might just end up in being blowouts for if that's the case. But yeah, Clemson was able to do similar things to what Texas has been doing the entire season, but finally gets caught up with them at NC State, who is extremely hot, and we'll see if Arkansas can turn things around this week. It's definitely they have a great opportunity to rise back up into the, maybe even to get back into the top 5, because they've pretty much been there the entire season, but have had their struggles the past few weeks. But yeah, I mean, NC State, really, really solid stuff overall. Don't want to look past that, and if they continue to do that, could easily jump into the top 10 pretty quickly.
Yeah, no doubt. It seems like the ACC is starting to heat up at the top of the conference now. It seemed like it was Clemson's conference to lose, and certainly did that this last weekend, dropping all 3 games. So now you kind of have NC State, Clemson, Florida State, Georgia Tech still kind of near the top as well, even after dropping back-to-back series. So kind of heating up at the top of that conference, and it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top in the regular season and see how things fare in that conference tourney as well.
Yeah, and staying in the ACC, we have Louisville jumping back into the top 25 after being out for 1 week, even though they did go 2-2, lost a midweek at Kentucky, but then hosted Florida State, who was number 4, down to number 5, and won that series there. So we just thought that was enough to bring them back in. They were probably at that like 26th spot the past week, just because they did play, I believe, Clemson last week, and had a really tight series there. So overall, on the road for Louisville, when they were at Clemson, we didn't feel like maybe they even necessarily deserved to drop out, but just because they were in that 25 spot, it was going to be tough to look past them there. But showed it that they could beat good teams at home and deserve to jump back in, and Southern Miss finally joining them in the top 25 on our end as well.
Yeah, Southern Miss finally avoids the 2-2 week. They get the full 4-0 week. Not any. I mean, actually, Southeastern Louisiana, pretty solid midweek win. The weekend series was nothing too impressive, but solid week from them, and we just needed a week of them not having a loss and not having 2 losses. So finally able to jump in, one of those teams that kind of just, we didn't have them in the rankings, but everyone else did. Kind of the flip of Arizona for us that we've had pretty high recently, but they finally dropped a series this weekend at Texas Tech, kind of a bad series loss there. And we kind of adjusted accordingly, dropping them a decent amount.
Yeah, dropping them to 16. And, you can't look past going to App State. They have one of the best, at least looking fields in the country, with all the pretty much surrounded by a forest out there. So Southern Miss getting the job done at one of the best environments. And, yeah, finally deserved to jump in there. And since we did talk about somebody maybe on some sort of podcast being a Tennessee hater, we have Vandy going back to 23 now after having a really good week last week, kind of having a stinker at Ole Miss here, losing that series and also losing a midweek. So dropping down to 23. It really just seems like they can win series at home, and then on the road, it's a real struggle. It's kind of a similar message for a lot of SEC teams, but I just, some people might not have confidence in Vanderbilt. It just seems like we might have a thing against the state of Tennessee at this point, but, that was just preseason predictions that might be turning our favor.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it feels like Vanderbilt has had more clear struggles than Tennessee, but Vanderbilt's RPI sits at 3. Tennessee down to 10 now, has dropped a bit these last couple weeks, but Vandy, even with those rough weeks, is staying strong at the top there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the committee navigates giving these hosting spots to the SEC schools. We know that conference just gets really boosted with the RPI. Doesn't really align with necessarily the conference standings. Kind of just a matter of who you draw as your opponents, whether you draw them home or away, and it kind of just snowballs from there. So it'll be really interesting to see how they navigate, taking those things into consideration, who you played at home, who you played away, did you play Missouri, all things to take into consideration there.
Yeah, it's just about if you played Missouri and got 3 automatic wins, and that, helps your record, but does not help your RPI really at all. Even like South Carolina, if you get them in conference and you're on the lucky side of things, just able to rack up wins for the most part for some of these top teams. But yeah, we spoke on the 2 teams that joined the top 25. The 2 that dropped out were 24 and 25 last week, Western Kentucky and Georgia Tech. Both struggled, especially Western Kentucky. Looked like a team that was pretty solidly in the postseason, and now with a series sweep at FIU, that's really not what you like to see. Putting them in some pretty muddy waters to potentially not even make the tournament at this point, so they're really going to need to turn things around to even get back in the rankings and make a run to solidify their spot for just even making the tournament right now.
Yeah, not a great week for Western Kentucky. Really need to turn things around. Getting swept like that's just something. It's really hard to afford that as a mid-major, especially with a team like Western Kentucky. Didn't have a strong non-conference schedule, and so really need to take care of business in conference play. And then Georgia Tech, really strange how they were playing that well and then just went on a 7-game losing streak there. Finally won that Sunday game against Virginia, so glad they broke the streak there. Did have a tough midweek against Auburn, and although Virginia's not ranked right now, we do know that's a talented team, being the preseason number 2. Haven't played up to their expectations whatsoever, but still not an easy series for Georgia Tech, but losing 7 straight just seems like that came out of nowhere, because it seemed like Georgia Tech was turning into a potential national seed. But suddenly things have turned in the opposite direction very quickly.
Yeah, things really flipped on its head for Georgia Tech, and Virginia, a team that is still trying to push to make the tournament now, so they have a lot to fight for, and we're able to get a solid series win there to boost up the RPI. Any other teams to talk about in your top 25?
No, I don't think so.
Sweet. All right. Well, teams just on the outside looking in. Obviously, Georgia Tech and Western Kentucky, I think, fall back a decent amount. Now, not really in consideration because they have had some pretty tough weeks. Georgia Tech, the past few weeks, have been pretty brutal, like you mentioned. But I think mainly looking at TCU, that's a big one. Maybe should jump back in pretty soon if they can continue to perform well. Just beat Baylor the past week. Also, Kansas, a team that really maybe that 26 spot for me at this point. TCU and Kansas kind of fighting for that for me with that just Big 12 conference. Just a mess at the back of the rankings. It feels like just everybody's vying to slot themselves in somewhere in the top 25, and a few teams have been, and it's just a few fall in, a few come back in, and it's just a mess for that conference. But very competitive. TCU is still in a spot to potentially host because their RPI is pretty good. So if they're able to put a few more good weeks together, should be jumping back into the top 25 and be in hosting conversation.
Yeah, definitely have both those teams into consideration, another one for me would be UTSA. Been on the outside looking in the last couple of weeks. Another team that had a very strong month of April. And with East Carolina struggling, it looks like UTSA is probably going to take the American Conference. First time that conference will have a new champion in, I think, like 5 or 6 years. East Carolina has been dominating that conference. And so UTSA handling business right now. Seems like they should be able to hang on to that one, and certainly on the outside looking in for us right now.
Yep, for sure. Another team to mention, probably Iowa. I think they're also right on the outside looking in. Been for a while. Haven't faced great competition, but they're pretty much dominating the Big Ten right now. Kind of running away with it. Just keep sweeping weekends, even though some of the games are pretty close. Just are able to squeak out wins and continue to sweep teams that are decent in the conference. They had a really easy schedule to begin the season, at least in conference play, and now starting to finally face some tougher competition and still getting the job done. I think their momentum is just riding high at this point, and yeah, playing really well. We'll see if they can continue to do that with a West Coast run with some of the better teams in the conference also coming up. So if they're able to do that, should be able to jump in the top 25. Doesn't seem like they're going to be anywhere near getting a hosting conversation. They're at in the 60s, maybe low 60s in RPI, so have a lot of work to be done there. But if they're able to continue to pull through, who knows what could happen with that team.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to win the Big Ten, it looks like, if they're able to hang on. 3 weeks left still, but I think they have a 3-game lead right now. Don't have a crazy tough schedule remaining. Only 2 conference series. One of them is against Oregon, though, so we'll see how that shapes up. They do play it at home, so you may think they're a slight favorite there potentially. One other team that I would have on my radar is Florida. Rough start to the year, but have been heating up recently. Haven't played the best competition on those series wins until this last week with that series win over Arkansas. They have a series against South Carolina this weekend. I imagine they win that one as well. And then 2 tough series, Texas and Alabama, to finish it up. But I think if they win that South Carolina series, win one of those other 2 as well, they're right in conversation for the top 25 and probably brings their RPI into consideration for hosting as well, which would be crazy considering how their year started.
Yeah, I think their RPI right now is like 18, so they don't have to do much to be in hosting conversation at all. I think they definitely have games that they can win, obviously with South Carolina in there, but it's going to be a tough stretch to make them in consideration. I think there are just a lot of SEC teams that are in front of them, and I don't think if you're a top 16 RPI team in the SEC, you necessarily get a spot if you are on the back end of that, with a lot of other conferences vying for those positions. But I think the only other team to mention for me at this point is Northeastern. 9 losses right now, have just been dominating their conference. So I think that they have put themselves pretty consistently most years. They've been very good the past few years, so they're finally getting to the conversation now where they could jump into the top 25 at the back end of the year.
Yeah, very solid team. No Q1 games yet, but continue to win, and when you keep winning games, you get in the conversation. So if they continue to do that, could see them break in at the end of the season here.
Any other teams on the outside looking in for you?
I think we got them.
Sweet. Well, we'll go to our top play of the week now. Might be not necessarily a top play, but we'll let it play out and then we'll talk about it after.
Lead for UCF. 2-0 pitch. Ground ball to first base. Bodeker will have pitcher cover. This time they execute, get the out. 2 down, runner at third. And they throw the ball away, and here comes the runner home, and he's going to score, and it's a tie ball game. Angelo Smith thought the inning was over.
So there we had maybe a top blunder of the week by the pitcher for UCF, Angelo Smith. Covers first base on the ground ball, gets a second out of the inning, but thinks it is the final out. So, just decides to trash talk the runner at first, spikes the ball on the ground, and then the runner at third goes home and ties the game, and then the pitcher gets pulled right after that, which I think is acceptable. But Yeah, very interesting play result there. Don't necessarily know how they scored it, but it's a tough look for UCF, and they ended up pretty much getting blown out after that point in the game.
Yeah, I would love to tune into UCF PFP practice this week. Not sure if the week before they were practicing the spiking the ball and trash talking the runner, but I imagine they're not practicing that this week and probably pretty focused on those drills. Yeah, just a crazy slip up there. Not too often you see people forget how many outs there are at this level. And when you do, you usually don't see it cost you a run either, especially in that type of moment. You got to be locked in, especially in those late innings in a close game. And yeah, that's just a tough one to let your emotions get to you.
Yeah, really, really tough look there for UCF after not really having the season that they would like to have, and against tougher competition, letting it slip like that is not what you want to see. But now looking at our player of the week, we have Belmont pitcher Zane Brown going with the no-hitter versus Valpo, 9 strikeouts. And looking at the weekend as a whole, Belmont gave up no runs as a team versus Valpo, so maybe we can consider putting this on the whole pitching staff as well. But Zane Brown was the headliner here with the no-hitter.
Yeah, we have a couple of those weeks where we've shouted out the whole pitching staff. This one's certainly in consideration, but we'll give it to the individual for the no-hitter there. It's an impressive feat no matter who you're going against, and when you are able to pull that out for all 9, super impressive.
Yeah, and now let's head into our series predictions from the past week. We're going with the three-peat 4-1 for myself, third straight week of that record with Texas A&M at Texas, Clemson at North Carolina State, Oregon State at Oregon, Oklahoma at Georgia, and Tennessee at LSU. I got 4 of those right. Kevin got 2, unfortunately, because that Tennessee LSU series just slipped away in the first game, and we'll take it on my side, but a tough loss there.
Yeah, that one was pretty unbelievable. Yeah, it's just a tough one. Thought we were in store for another week of us both being positive, both sharing the same record. We keep seems like we keep having 3 of the same predictions, 2 different ones. It just keeps lining up that way, and we've been splitting the ones that we're different about. But this week took them both, and so I'll have to get that back this upcoming week if we have different ones again.
Yeah, I think the shocker this week was definitely Clemson at NC State. I mean, maybe not a shock to lose the series there. That's why we put it as one of the predictions. But getting swept is definitely something that jumps off the page. But yeah, I mean, overall, not a terrible week. Obviously, cumulatively still positive. Our records are still looking pretty nice. 29-16 for me. Kevin, 27-18. So very, very solid. Definitely not at the same point last year. Had a little bit sloppier records, but we'll continue to hopefully dominate these predictions and continue as we go. But starting with those upcoming series, I have, I guess, 5 to mention, top ones that I could see straight off the bat. Number 1, Texas, going to number 11, Arkansas. We mentioned it earlier. This is the first road test, really, that Texas is going on. Obviously, they've still faced SEC competition on the road, but Arkansas, one of the first top teams, even though they're no longer a top 10 team for now, they should be, at least from most of the season they have been. They've been a top 3 team a lot of the time, and now dropping to 11, but it still should easily be the toughest test for Texas on the road that they've had this year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Their road series so far, Mississippi State, Missouri, and Kentucky, I believe. So 3 of the bottom teams in the SEC right now. And so, yeah, like we mentioned, it's super impressive, the series that they've been winning. They've won, I think, like 4 series against top 10 teams now, but all of them have been in Austin. And so it'll be interesting to see how they do on the road against, not that Arkansas is a desperate team, but kind of a desperate team right now, losing 3 straight. They're wanting to gain some momentum before the end of the season here. And Obviously, we think Arkansas is one of the best teams in the country, but that's a team that's looking to change the trajectory right now and get back on track.
Yeah, it's really interesting because pitching seemed to be the strong point of that Arkansas team, at least preseason. It really has been flipped on its head here. The hitting has been just insanely different than what we've seen the past few years from an Arkansas squad. Even with the top hitters, I mean, Wahiwa Aloy last year was just struggling in the SEC overall. I think hit like 250 and just has had a complete power surge the past year and looks just like a complete hitter overall. And he's really leading that squad on the hitting side of things, and the pitching not kind of carrying their own weight there at this point, but we'll see if they can turn that around. Texas doesn't have the scariest lineup out there, especially with the injuries that they've had, but they just have been able to figure out how to win, piece things together when it's needed the most. So we'll see if they're able to do that again at Arkansas, but should be a really interesting series starting this week. And then heading to what is a top 10 matchup, I've number 3 Clemson going to number 5 Florida State. This is a really big one to determine the end of season rankings for the ACC. Both teams reeling a little bit after tough series on the road for Clemson at NC State getting swept, like we mentioned, and then Florida State losing at Louisville. So both teams off of some losses the past week, and still top 10 teams here, but they do need to turn it around to see where things will lie in the ACC standings.
Yeah, it's a big one for that conference. Like we mentioned, the top of the ACC, kind of hard to navigate now. You got a few teams at the top there, and this is a big one to try and differentiate yourself. Yeah, also interesting because Clemson's on the road here. I would kind of be banking on a Clemson bounce back, but it is tough when you have to go on the road to Florida State here. So should be an interesting one. Definitely a hard one to predict.
Yeah, for sure. And now going to the back end of our top 25, we have number 21 Alabama going to number 23 Vanderbilt. My heart lies in a specific direction, but both these teams have been pretty inconsistent recently. Alabama for a while looked like they could be a top 10 team, but have struggled, losing so many conference series recently and just holding on by a thread to stay ranked. They did get lucky with just how their schedule lined up with getting Missouri at home when they needed it the most. But they still weren't super impressive, at least in comparison to other teams that Missouri has faced. I think they only had one run rule instead of all 3 games. So they did definitely get back on the right track for Alabama, but they should against a team like that, and now they're getting tested a little bit more at Vanderbilt when Vanderbilt has done really well at home for the most part. So both teams looking to get back on track here, but Vanderbilt probably has the upper hand with the home field advantage.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Both, I mean, it's reflected in the rankings with these teams at 21 and 23, but both teams have kind of just taken care of business against the bottom half of the SEC and have struggled when they've played those top teams. The one exception would be Vanderbilt sweeping Georgia, which came out of nowhere. But other than that, it's kind of been the same story for both these teams. And yeah, it's kind of a hard one to predict. I feel like I do like the outlook for Alabama as a whole better, but that is tough going on the road at Vandy. We just know home field makes a big difference, especially in the SEC.
Yeah, for sure. And now going to a rivalry series, we have number 13 UCLA going to USC. Both teams kind of at the top of the conference in that 2 to 4 range. Really just seeing the West Coast schools in the Big Ten kind of dominate. Besides Iowa, who holds it down at the top, the next 4 spots are West Coast schools. So should be interesting to see how UCLA and USC kind of figure this one out. UCLA looking to potentially make a run to get that number 1 spot and host. Overall, their RPI is pretty solid, at least the best in the conference, and then USC trying to solidify their spot in making the postseason.
Yeah, we've seen the West Coast teams have a lot of success in their first year in the Big Ten here, and both of these teams are part of that. UCLA looking to continue staying on the right track after dropping that series to Oregon 2 weekends ago. Won a solid series against Penn State this past week, and yeah, big rivalry series here. We'll see if feels like if USC wins this one, really solidifies them as a team to be in regionals. But if they drop it, uh, could see themselves on the bubble and potentially on the wrong side of the bubble there.
Yeah, definitely. And the last series that I want to mention is TCU going to number 16 Arizona. We've been high on Arizona for a while. They did just lose a series versus Texas Tech, so dropping back a little bit. And TCU, their RPI says they're one of the best teams in the country. We have them right on the outside looking into the top 25, but this series could mean a lot for the conference and just for how things stand. Both these teams definitely in a spot to potentially host, so whoever wins this puts them in a very good spot to be in that position. But we'll have to see. Arizona really tough to play there. Have a very unique field, so we'll see if TCU can to manage to hold up and win that series.
Yeah, it seems like these teams were going to be fighting for that Big 12 title for a while. Now looks like West Virginia is kind of just going to run away with it, but Arizona and TCU potentially fighting for that second hosting spot for the conference. And yeah, this should be a big one. Feels like if TCU wins this one, they'll certainly be jumping back into our rankings here. So a lot on the line for them, and as well as that, like we mentioned, the hosting spot as well. A lot of implications there with both these teams kind of fringe RPIs for that.
Yep, for sure. Any other series to mention on your side?
I think the one big one I will mention is Auburn at Tennessee. Big one right on the outside of the top 10 there. It's 14 Auburn at 12 Tennessee. And yeah, kind of an interesting one. Tennessee has lost 3 of their last 4. Auburn has kind of just been bouncing up and down throughout the season, it feels like. Wasn't sure if it was going to be a team, capable of beating one of those top teams. But they did have that sweep over LSU just a couple weeks ago. So obviously capable of taking down one of those top teams, and we'll see if they're able to do it here as well.
Yeah, a few weeks ago I would have been outright thinking that Tennessee was going to dominate this series, but it looks like a completely different just atmosphere overall in the SEC where it's just all jumbled all over the place right now. And Tennessee and Arkansas struggling recently means Auburn is right there in the hunt for things and could jump them if they get a good week here. So Auburn, a team similar to Ole Miss, where we've had kind of in that second tier of the SEC with Arkansas and Tennessee well within the top tier. But now the rankings show that they are right next to each other. So it should be a really interesting series to look out for. But if you don't have anything else to mention, we can wrap this up. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Sweep Baseball Podcast. Peace.